I grew up with a hole in my life that no amount of laughter or hard work could fill. My father and grandmother told me my mother was gone, taken before I could walk or talk. She was a good woman, Grandma always said, her voice steady but her eyes drifting away. But God called her home. My father never added to the story. He'd just grunt, tighten his jaw, and walk off to his workshop. So I learned to stop asking questions. I carried her absence like a scar I couldn't see but always felt. At school events, when other kids showed up with their mothers cheering loudest in the bleachers, fixing ribbons in their daughter's hair, or handing them juice boxes, I stood alone. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was fine with just my dad and grandma. But at night, I dreamed of what it might feel like to have someone tuck me in, to have a mother's perfume in the room, to hear a soft voice telling me everything would be all right. By 17, I thought I had learned to live with it. My father was a hard-working mechanic on Chicago's South Side, bent under the weight of responsibility. My grandmother filled our apartment with hymns and gospel preaching, loving me fiercely but with tough hands and stricter prayers. I did well enough in school, hung with friends who cracked jokes on the basketball court, and held a part-time job at Mrs. Grace's corner store. She was a stout, sharp-eyed woman in her 60s who treated me like one of her own, though she often barked orders with no softness. Mrs. Grace trusted me enough to run errands for customers who couldn't make it in. One sticky summer afternoon, she handed me a brown paper bag with milk, bread, dried beans, and aspirin. "Take this to the blue house by the tracks," she said. "The woman there is sick. Don't take too long." The house looked weary, its paint flaking, the yard wild with weeds. I knocked, and after a pause, the door opened. A woman stood there, thin, with a faded scarf tied over her head. Her eyes startled me. Dark, deep, carrying both sadness and kindness. She gave me a tired smile. "Thank you, baby. Bring it in." Her home was small but neat, filled with the scent of herbs and soap. I set the groceries on her kitchen table and turned to go. She thanked me, her voice soft and warm in a way that lingered after I left. The next week I returned with another bag. This time, she asked me to sit for a moment. She wanted to know about my classes, my plans for the future. She listened with such intent that I felt my words mattered more than usual. That became the pattern. I brought groceries, she invited me in, and our conversations grew longer. Her house became a kind of refuge. She asked about the friends I spent time with, reminded me to stay focused, sometimes even laughed at my clumsy jokes. When I admitted I was failing algebra, she asked to see my notebook. She walked me through a problem, breaking it down with patience I wasn't used to. For the first time, the numbers made sense. "See," she said with a small smile, "you're smart. You just need confidence." I left that evening walking taller. Something about her felt familiar. I didn't know why, but I felt comfortable around her in a way I couldn't explain. Without realizing it, I started telling her things I kept from everyone else. How I wanted to go to college, how I worried about money, how sometimes I felt invisible in my own house. She never judged, just listened. One rainy night, I delivered medicine to her. Water dripped steadily from a leak in the ceiling into a metal bowl. She looked embarrassed. "I can't climb up there to fix it," she admitted. I found an old ladder outside and climbed into the rain, patching the hole with plastic and with scraps. She stood below, her eyes following me like her life depended on it. When I came down, dripping wet, she touched my arm gently. "You don't know how much you're helping me." I laughed it off. "It's nothing. You remind me of the mother I never had." Her breath hitched, eyes glistening, but she just smiled faintly. I didn't understand why her reaction felt so heavy, why her gaze lingered as though she was holding back a truth. The weeks blurred into months, and helping her became second nature. Sometimes I wondered why I felt such a pull to her door, but I didn't question it too much. Maybe it was because she always looked so grateful, or maybe it was because her house felt different from mine, quieter, but somehow warmer. She asked me about school in a way that made me feel seen, not just lectured. She reminded me to keep my friends close, but choose them carefully. Sometimes she'd hum softly while cooking, a tune I couldn't place, but that stirred something deep inside me, like an echo from a forgotten dream. I started staying longer each time. If the fence needed mending, I fixed it. If her porch was dirty, I swept it. She had arthritis in her hands, so I opened jars, carried heavy bags, or climbed up to reach things from shelves. She always said thank you in a voice that shook a little, and sometimes I'd catch her looking at me too long, as if memorizing my face. It was strange, but I pushed the thought away. One night after school, I stopped by to check on her. The sky had been threatening rain all day, and by the time I got there, thunder was rolling overhead. She seemed quieter than usual, her eyes restless. I asked if she was okay, and she just nodded, pressing her lips together. I fixed the broken hinge on her cupboard, the sound of rain slapping against the windows. She sat at the table watching me, her hands folded tightly. Finally, her voice cracked the silence. "What if I told you I was your mother?" I froze. The hammer slipped from my hand and clattered on the floor. I stared at her, certain I had misheard. "What?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm your mother, baby. I never died. They told you I was gone, but I've been here all along. I was forced away, but I never stopped loving you." I felt like the floor tilted under me. My throat closed up. No, that's not true. My dad said you died. Grandma said you were gone." She shook her head, tears spilling now. "They told you what they thought was best, but I never left you in my heart. I've prayed for you every day, and now here you are, helping me without even knowing who I was." My chest burned. Anger and confusion churned so hard I could barely breathe. "You let me believe you were dead. Do you know what that did to me? Do you know how many nights I cried for you? And you were here the whole time." She reached out, her voice breaking. "I thought you'd hate me. I thought knowing the truth would tear you apart. I stayed away because I thought it was the only way to protect you. Forgive me." I stumbled back, shaking. My hands curled into fists. The walls felt too close, her voice too heavy. Without another word, I turned and ran out into the rain. Her sobs followed me into the storm. For days I avoided her. I walked past her house without looking, my heart pounding each time. My mind was a battlefield. Half of me replaying the kindness she had shown me, half of me screaming at the betrayal. Every laugh we shared, every moment I had trusted her, now felt twisted. At home, my silence grew heavier. Grandma noticed, her prayers louder each night. My father barely looked at me, but one evening I broke. "Why did you lie to me?" I demanded, voice shaking. "Why did you say she was dead?" He stiffened, his face hard, but then something cracked. His voice was low, almost ashamed. "Because I thought she abandoned us. Because I couldn't bring myself to tell you the truth. It hurt too much. I thought it was easier for you to believe she was gone. She didn't abandon us." I shouted, my throat raw. "She loves me. She never stopped. And you let me think I was motherless." For the first time in my life, I saw tears in my father's eyes. His shoulders slumped. "Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I robbed you of something you deserved. I thought I was protecting you, but maybe I just stole years from you." His words didn't erase the ache, but they opened something in me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about her eyes, the way they had filled with tears when she told me the truth, the way she had smiled at me every time I walked through her door. The next evening, I found myself standing outside her house again. My chest tightened as I knocked. When the door opened, she stood there, her face swollen from crying. She looked at me as if I were a miracle she didn't dare believe in. "I'm sorry," she whispered before I could speak. I stepped inside. We sat at the table, the silence so thick it pressed against my skin. Finally, she began to talk. She told me everything. How she and my father had fought, how his family had turned against her, how she had been told to leave for her own safety and mine. She pulled out a shoebox, trembling hands lifting old letters she had written but never mailed, photographs of me as a baby she had kept hidden. "I never stopped being your mother," she said softly. "I just lost the right to hold you." Tears blurred my vision. My anger hadn't disappeared, but something inside me shifted. She wasn't a ghost or a stranger. She was mine, and I was hers, no matter how broken the story was. I started visiting her again, though the first visits were stiff and awkward. She told me about the day I was born, how I had cried so loudly the nurses joked I was announcing myself to the world. She laughed when I tried her cornbread recipe and burned it to a crisp, then guided me through making it right. We planted tomatoes and collard greens in her yard, our hands working side by side in the dirt. Sometimes we laughed until our sides hurt. Other times we sat quietly, letting tears come when they wanted. Bringing her back into the wider fold of my family wasn't simple. The first time I told Grandma I had found her, she looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. She didn't shout, didn't deny it. She just sighed, deep and tired, and said, "God works in ways we don't always understand." When I asked if she'd known, her silence was enough of an answer. I wanted to be angry, but I was too exhausted to carry more fury. I invited my grandmother to see her a week later. The meeting was tense. They stood in the small living room, neither speaking at first. My mother's hands twisted together, my grandmother's lips pressed tight. Finally, Grandma spoke. "You look older." My mother gave a small, sad smile. "Time does that." It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't rejection either. It was a start, shaky as it was. My father was harder. He stayed away even after I told him I had seen her, spoken to her, learned the truth. He shook his head, muttering that I didn't understand, that things were more complicated than I knew. Weeks passed before he finally came with me. When she opened the door and saw him, her eyes widened and his face went stone still. For a long moment, no one spoke. The air between them felt like it could shatter with one wrong word. My mother's voice trembled when she finally said, "Hello, Marcus." My father's chest rose and fell slowly. He looked at her, then at me. His shoulders slumped. "We can't undo the past," he said, voice rough, "but maybe we can do better now." That was all. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but a crack in the wall. Enough for me to step through. In the weeks that followed, my life felt like it was split between two worlds. At home, things were uneasy. My father spoke more softly to me, but the weight of guilt hung around him like a heavy coat. My grandmother prayed louder at night, as though trying to stitch together what had been broken. At her house, my mother's house, I felt something different. Not perfect, not easy, but healing. She told me stories of my childhood I had never heard. How I had taken my first steps toward a radio playing Al Green. How I had once fallen asleep curled in a laundry basket. How my first word had been "Mama." Hearing those things was like filling in missing chapters of my own life. Each memory she gave me was a piece of myself I hadn't known I was missing. We cooked together often. She showed me how to season greens the right way, how to fry catfish without letting it soak up too much oil, how to bake sweet potato pie with just the right hint of cinnamon. I messed up more times than I got it right, but she laughed and clapped her hands, telling me, "You'll get there, baby. You've got it in you." There were moments that hurt, too. Sometimes I would look at her and wonder what life would have been like if she had been there all along, if she had been at my basketball games, if she had been the one helping me with math homework instead of me struggling alone, if she had been there to hug me on the nights I cried. The ache of those what-ifs was sharp, but I learned to sit with it. One evening, I asked her why she never tried harder to come back. Her face crumpled and tears spilled down. "I was scared," she admitted. "Your father's people told me if I stayed, I'd lose you anyway, maybe in ways worse than distance. I thought leaving was the only way to protect you. I thought if you grew up believing I was gone, at least you wouldn't be caught in the middle of a war." Her words didn't erase the pain, but they gave it shape. It wasn't abandonment. It was fear, desperation, flawed love. Slowly, I forgave her. Not in one big moment, but in small choices, choosing to visit again the next day, choosing to listen when she told a story, choosing to laugh when she teased me about my clumsy cooking. Forgiveness grew like a seed, watered a little each time we spent together. The neighborhood started noticing too. Some people whispered. Some said it was a miracle. Some looked at me with pity, others with judgment. I stopped caring. For the first time, I felt whole in a way I hadn't before. One bright afternoon, we were in her yard pulling weeds from the garden we had planted together. The sun was warm on our backs. She paused, looking at me with eyes softer than I'd ever seen. "You didn't know," she said quietly, "but all along, you were helping your mom." The words pierced straight to my chest. My throat tightened. I reached for her, pulling her into a hug, holding on like I'd never let go. Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't hide them. For once, I didn't need to pretend. Life didn't magically smooth out after that. There were still awkward dinners where silence hung heavy, still moments when my father and mother couldn't look each other in the eye for long, still nights when the ache of lost years crept in. But none of that outweighed the truth I carried now. I had a mother. I had always had a mother. And in a strange twist, by helping her when I thought she was just a stranger, I had given us both a second chance. She had been waiting, hoping, praying for me, and I had walked right into her life without knowing. The bond we rebuilt wasn't perfect, but it was real and it was ours. I didn't know I was helping my mom, but I was. And in helping her, I discovered the missing piece of myself, the piece that taught me that love, though buried, can be found again, and that forgiveness, though hard, can heal even the deepest wounds. Thanks for watching.